More than any other show on TV, watching Better Call Saul is to watch people hone their craft, to study every detail that goes into making them great at what they do. Our main character, Jimmy McGill, is a great lawyer because he's also a great con man and scam artist. Mike thrives in the criminal underworld because of his book smarts as a cop and his street smarts as a crooked one. Kim is the best attorney in New Mexico through sheer force of will and hard work. Every inch of Better Call Saul is focused on showing us how and why these characters succeed on a microscopic level. And that attention to detail is present in the very construction of the show.
When we talk about Saul, it's crazy. It's like we're at some sort of Danish design school in Copenhagen, and we're going nuts over the way the armrest is shaped on a chair. Because what a beautiful chair, and it wouldn't work if you had a different wood grain in the armrest or whatever.
Every single decision in the making of the show is made deliberately, with the kind of technical precision that would make the Germans building Gus's super meth lab blush. And I think that this kind of storytelling is most on display in how Better Call Saul tells its stories visually through montages. And today we're going to look at 3 of its best. Heads up, there will be some spoilers ahead, but that won't be my primary focus, and, it's a prequel series to Breaking Bad, so that's probably where the majority of the spoilers are anyway. I'm Jackson, and this is Ideas of Play. So let's start by trying to hammer out just what I'm talking about when I say montage editing. When I say montage, what do you think of? Is it this? How about this? Or maybe something like this.
Michael Francis Rizzi, do you renounce Satan?
I do renounce him.
Of course, they're all montages, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a single definition that encompasses all of them. Does there have to be music? Do the shots have to be short? Does it have to tie together separate storylines? Well, to get to the heart of it, we actually have to go back to this crazy-looking guy. This is Sergei Eisenstein, the Soviet filmmaker who basically came up with the idea of non-linear editing as we know it today, where a cut isn't just showing us what's in the next room, but cutting to another story, place, or time. He called all of that montage editing, and while that's a little broad, it's his main point about editing that's incredibly important here. Nothing exists without context. No matter the size, shape, or color, a montage is all about showing an audience one idea, then stacking another on top of it, and then another on top of that, always building towards something bigger out of these smaller pieces. Now, the reason I started thinking about any of this in the first place is because Better Call Saul has a lot of montages, and not all of them fit neatly into a conventional definition. Sure, the show has its fair share of classic ones, and we'll look at those too, but at first glance, a lot of them are just scenes without dialogue. Scenes that intently follow a character's process as they set up or execute a plan. But each one of these montages comes back to that central idea. Nothing exists without context. Let's start by looking at one of these more conventional ones.
It's showtime, folks.
In this one, Jimmy is buckling down and living the public defender life. It's monotonous and a ton of work, but that's what a public defender is. And he's trying to put in his dues and live on the straight and narrow. Plus, it impresses his love interest, Kim. But as the montage continues, it speeds up, and we can see that it's getting tougher and tougher for Jimmy to go on.
Showtime.
This line itself is a reference to another famous montage from the film All That Jazz, a movie about a director who literally works himself to death.
It's showtime. It's from a movie.
It's showtime, folks.
And that idea of hard work not paying off is completely present in this montage. There's no progression. We don't see Jimmy graduating to bigger and better things. It's just the repetition of the same treadmill. It's not glamorous. It's full of grimy bathrooms, lunches in stairwells, and the sticker troll under the bridge.
Like a troll under a bridge. You must have the stickers or you won't pass.
Each shot, each cut delivers the next line in this story. But there's something special about the way Better Call Saul makes use of this montage in particular. It doesn't just build on each shot and cut within itself, but it's also opening a dialogue with the arc of the entire episode, and the series as a whole. Gilligan and Gould are acutely aware of the show's status as a prequel. We know where this story is going because we've seen the next chapter in Jimmy's life.
Clearly his taste in women is the same as his taste in lawyers, only the very best, with just the right amount of dirty.
And in one fell swoop, this montage shows us where Jimmy started and some of the reasons he might have turned to the dark side. It's a perfect visualization of his internal struggle between doing what's right and doing what's exciting. But if we zoom into this episode alone, the context changes slightly. This is the second episode of the series, and Jimmy has turned to living life on the straight and narrow because of this recent run-in with a drug kingpin.
Colombian neckties. I cut their throats, and then I pull their live tongues through the slits. Bitch!
Still, as the montage shows us, this is not the life for him. So when he's approached by Tuco's lieutenant in the next scene, we know what his decision will be before he does.
Hey, look, I'm a lawyer, not a criminal.
You are shitting me for when you figure out you're in the game.
This 4-minute montage is able to visually build on itself, the episode and the series, by always keeping in mind the context of where it came from and where it's going. And Better Call Saul creates the same kind of call and response in much more unconventional ways. Take this example from one of the best episodes of 2017, Chicanery. Jimmy and Kim are set to defend his bar license against his brother Chuck. But the montage plays out not over music, but over the opening statements of the trial, and follows the two as they prepare.
In the matter of James M. McGill, the State Bar intends to prove the following violations of the ethical code.
We follow them all the way from getting ready at home to their entrance into the courtroom, and each shot tells us something about their relationship. They're framed together in the doorway, united visually. Kim rehearses reading printed notes off of lined paper because she understands that appearances and implications are everything. As they march into the building, his dress shoes and her stilettos click on the pavement like combat boots. The traffic cones are symbols of danger and caution, and we know why they're there, to accommodate Chuck, reminding us of the advantage that he holds over them. Even still, they rise up the stairs to meet the challenge. While the door divides them, they reach across it for a gaze, then break it down and enter together. The whole sequence shows us their status as a team, all the while droning on about the charges being leveled against Jimmy and the challenges they are set to face before affirming that they're doing it together. Okay, now just 10 minutes later, Chuck is set to arrive.
All right, Mr. Alley, we need to make accommodations for your next witness, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
For the entire series, he has suffered from electromagnetic sensitivity, which has left him reclusive and unable to be in a room with electricity for very long. Jimmy has cared for him, and we've seen this affliction as a weakness. But now that he's the villain set to face off against Jimmy, that same affliction becomes ominous. The courtroom prepares for his arrival by removing electricity. It darkens. Time is removed. Those traffic cones from earlier come back into play, signaling the danger that he brings. The shots of the building itself don't feel as big as when Jimmy and Kim were walking towards it. We linger on the Jaguar leaping from the hood of his car, a predator ready to pounce on its prey. And as Chuck climbs the stairs, we watch him from behind, the opposite angle of Jimmy and Kim. From these two montages, we can see these two parties as opponents, and the power disparity between them is obvious. It's Chuck who holds all the cards. He brings with him literal darkness, changing the entire setting just by his presence. But that's not all there is to this sequence. The next episode starts with another similar montage after the trial is over. Jimmy and Kim have won and left Chuck in ruins. As part of his defense, Jimmy humiliated Chuck by outing his affliction as a mental illness.
If he were schizophrenic, it wouldn't take away from the fact that the defendant...
I am not crazy!
What's even worse is that Jimmy orchestrated events so that Chuck's ex-wife Rebecca witnessed the whole thing. This time though, the underlying audio is of Kim's closing statement, where she talks about Jimmy's value to the community.
Jimmy McGill has worked tirelessly to build a practice that helps an underserved and frankly overlooked segment of our community, the elderly.
Meanwhile, it's cross-cut with Rebecca leaving the courtroom and chasing after Chuck, showing us the worst of Jimmy as we hear about his best.
Because Jimmy McGill cares about people. He's devoted the past 3 years of his life to his brother's welfare, waking at 5 in the morning to buy Charles's favorite newspaper from the single newsstand in the city that carries it.
Each time we cross the threshold in these two episodes, we see a new perspective on the trial and its effect on our characters. They bookend this story, setting up a battle of David and Goliath before hitting us with the fallout of a feud between brothers. And always as we hear the pageantry of the trial itself, a place where justice can be received or exacted. And this is the kind of intricate storytelling that makes Jimmy's transformation into the sleazy Saul Goodman so compelling. Because the show is able to tell two parallel stories painted onto the same setting. And that's to say nothing of the other parallel story that's going on in Better Call Saul. If you've seen Breaking Bad, you're familiar with Mike as a part fixer, part detective, part spy, part black ops professional. His scenes stand in stark contrast to Jimmy's for a couple of reasons, but one of the most glaring differences is that there is little to no dialogue in the majority of Mike's scenes. His story is told almost entirely visually, and uses editing as its narrator. This kind of approach is present in the entire series. Better Call Saul never wastes time explaining what will happen or what's planned when it can answer those questions on the fly through a careful study of how a character goes about their business. But the way that the show handles Mike's story takes this to a whole nother level. Take this scene from the 3rd season. While it's nearly 6 minutes and there are only 2 lines of dialogue, which reads subtitles, I don't think most people would think of it as a montage. The music is purely atmospheric, and the cuts aren't fast. It doesn't compress time or space into neatly edited packages. But it behaves the same way as those other 2 montages we looked at, using editing to tell the story of Mike's process. The first thing it does is establish the scene. Then we see these sneakers. Coming into the scene, we don't know what Mike is doing there. All we know is that he put these sneakers on this telephone wire and that he put drugs in them. So where is he? Then we get our answer. Nearby, but far enough away that he needs binoculars. As we go on, each cut brings up or answers a question. Who is he waiting for? Cut to a truck, then to its drivers. They exit the truck. Mike follows them in his scope as they ditch their guns. Is he going to shoot them? No. He points his rifle upward and fires off a round. Why? Through subtitles, we literally see them come to the decision that the shots are coming from hunters. So this was Mike's plan, to trick them. Then we see his true target, the sneakers. Then we see why they ditched their guns. They're just over the border in Mexico. Cut to the fallout of his actions as Border Patrol seizes them and their cargo. We learn almost nothing from the pages of the script here. Instead, it's the edit that asks and then answers each question that moves the story along. Ironically, it reads as a sentence. Each cut or word on its own wouldn't mean anything. But once they're played out together, in context, they create a coherent thought. Every shot builds on the previous one until we finally get the full picture at the end of the sequence. It might not be as obvious as Jimmy's life as a public defender, and you might still think that this is not quite a montage. But all 3 of these sequences are built on the same idea, that nothing exists without context. And it's that idea that's so essential to understanding Better Call Saul. It's a show that has frequently been identified as living a double life, the Mike show and the Jimmy show, which don't usually meet. But the one thing that ties everything together is obsession, an addiction to our work, which is why it makes so much sense to deliver information through these tightly focused sequences. Better Call Saul itself is all about creating context. We only know about these people as side characters from Breaking Bad, and this series is teaching us their story, the reasons why they are who they are, and how they became that way. Because, after all, nothing exists without context. And if you're looking to spend some time refining your own craft, head on over to Skillshare. Whether it's learning how to shoot your own montages on a budget, crafting a consistent brand on social media, or making some kick-ass gelato, Skillshare has you covered. They're always adding new content that's way higher quality and more in-depth than anything you're gonna find here on YouTube. And if you follow my link in the description, you can get unlimited access to all of it for 2 months free. And that helps out the channel. And speaking of the channel, thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. There's tons more to talk about with Better Call Saul, so if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments. And if you want to help the channel out and get access to all sorts of extra material like my 16 pages of notes for this video and my map of every single montage in Better Call Saul, head over to my Patreon and throw in $1 or $2 to get access. This video took me a bit longer to make because I was moving and swamped with some other work, but I might have a big announcement coming for you guys soon. So stay tuned and thanks again.